Hi, everyone. We are here today with Dr. Nancy Dome, and she's agreed to do an interview with the American Studies blog. And we met about, 2 or 3 years ago. And since then, I've actually wanted to interview her. But recent events have made that possible. And so we're very happy to have her here with us today. I'll just give a brief introduction first. Dr. Nancy Dome has been supporting children to overcome their barriers and developing educators for over 20 years. She began her career as a child care worker, later went on to become a classroom teacher for 10 years, and also during that time was advising community schools in San Diego. And then she went on to receive her doctoral degree in education in 2004 and became a college professor at California State University, San Marcos, teaching equity, critical race theory, and culturally relevant teaching. So that is quite impressive, from a child care worker to PhD. But it didn't stop there because she also co-founded and is now the CEO of Epoch Education. And it's an organization, from what I've read, that offers online courses, workshops, coaching, and webinars to foster the understanding of diversity and development of inclusive cultures. And just to add a fun fact, I read, Nancy, that you also played volleyball for a while and coached for a number of years. So how did I do? Would you like to add anything?
I think you did great. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, great. So my first question is, how did you develop your interest in education and working with children and students at risk? Can you?
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
A little delay, so I apologize. I actually, the funny thing is, I never wanted to be a teacher, but I mean, I never didn't want to be a teacher. It just wasn't. It wasn't in something I thought about. I initially was interested in psychology. My undergrad is psychology, my BA, and I was actually living in Belgium, playing pro volleyball. And they needed to keep me busy because I was a little young and a little mischievous. And there was a Department of Defense school in Belgium, and they needed an American to be a substitute for the school. And they knew that I needed a little distraction, so I went and did that. And I realized, wow, I kind of like kids, I like teaching and I like doing that. But it still was, even at that time, it wasn't even something that I really contemplated. I was still going to be a psychologist and, marriage family therapist. And, but, just kind of things happened, and I ended up working as a childcare worker. And the teachers for that program, because it was a live-in residential treatment facility, were from juvenile court and community schools, and I would have to walk the kids to school every day. And I love this group of kids, but what I realized, and I think that this is, anyone in social services, at least in the United States, can really relate to this, is that, your caseloads are huge, and it's really hard to give the kids the attention that they really need in the families. And what I found in my role as a child care worker was I was kind of like a babysitter. I really wasn't having the impact I wanted to have. And one of the teachers said, you would probably be great at teaching. And it kind of sparked that memory I had of being in Belgium in 1990. And I thought, you know what, I might as well just kind of check it out. And that's kind of how it started. But I knew that at-risk population was my group. I knew that from the childcare working. I knew that I wanted to support kids who were marginalized, who either through family struggles or just societal struggles, just needed a little bit more support. And I found that I had a real natural talent for that. So I ended up going to juvenile court and community schools for 10 years and teaching, and probably the best 10 years of my professional career, just because working with those kids and watching them grow and change was amazing.
Yeah. Can you give us a few tips about recognizing children at risk? Because, I heard recently on the radio here in Germany, about every fourth or fifth child has some kind of problem, whether this is abuse or something at home. And often teachers don't recognize it, but, we might not recognize it in our neighborhood as well. So,
Mm-hmm.
do you have any tips you can give us?
Yeah, and I guess the easiest tip, because I think that every kid is different, is I think that every student, especially now, every child now is has a possibility of being at risk, and I think that's just kind of how I approach it. Even if they look like they come from a very stable home, if they look like they have everything, there are so many other hidden issues, and so I think I just always approach kids as, you know every kid can use some kind of support somehow that's external from the family, right? And I think that that's just how I approach it. I approach it as, how can I be of support to you? What can I offer you to help you on your way? But I think that, the things that people do look for are around, just are they despondent? Are they involved? Are they, kind of quiet? How many friends do they have? Who are they socializing with? All those things are telling us a story. And if you see kids who are alone a lot, I think, they're letting us know that there's something going on. Whether they don't have the social skills to be in relationship, or they're being bullied. And I think we just need to ask questions and be observant.
Yeah, I mean, this is especially important topic during Corona and all of
Yes.
what's
Yeah.
going on now, and the changes to families with loss of family members and income, and all kinds of other issues. So, I mean, it's a really timely um, topic. It always has been, but seems
Yeah.
even more important today. Um, well, you've had such a range of experience. Who is it most difficult to work with, children or adults? When you're
Adults. I don't. You don't have to even. And, with kids, I know what I'm going to get. And the thing about young adults, and because I mean, my preference is high school. I like that kind of 14 to 15 to 18-year-old. They even though they're kind of rough around the edges, they're honest. They tell you how they feel. You know what they're thinking, and they're also very willing. If you build relationship, if they trust you, they will do anything, for you initially, and eventually you teach them how to do it for themselves, right?
Mhm.
And adults are, we're so stuck, and there's ego, there's competition, there's fear, there's all these things that happen with adults. And also, I literally I remember teaching at the university, and I don't know if you've ever had this experience, Sabrina, but I okay, so I at that point I had been a classroom teacher for 13 years, where I've actually taught in the classroom, and I'm teaching students who have never been in the classroom, and they think that they know more than me. And I thought, even if I was the worst teacher in the world, I still have more experience than you, and there's something you can learn from me. So when you walk into a space and think that you already know everything, when you have zero experience, like, what did we call that? I mean, I'm trying to think of the words, but it's like, for me, I was a little incredulous. Like, why do I have to prove myself that I'm coming to with something you don't have?
Mhm.
And there's always something to learn from someone, right?
Oh yeah.
At least that's
Mhm.
my approach. But
Yeah.
I found it very interesting, teaching in higher ed, and actually having people feel like I got nothing to learn. I already know what I need to know. I'm going to go out there and be the best teacher. And I'm like, for me, the reason I push is not so much just for their own good, but because they're going to go out there and cause harm to our kids
Yeah.
unintentionally, but they will. I can promise it.
Well, if you think about it, in German schools, they have 25, 30 kids in every class.
Yeah.
And how many classes they have a year times 20, 30 years of teaching. You are right, there's like thousands of kids that can be affected. So yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, and some of these topics they are very uncomfortable, and they're still uncomfortable in some ways to me. But we're all working on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
um, yeah, your the company you founded focuses on three core concepts, and there are so many things your company could have founded on or could work with. But you chose diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Why those three? I mean, you could have had racism, discrimination, all kinds of other things.
Well, I mean, I think that those are just the other side of the same coin, right? I choose to focus on the positive. How do we get to the place we want to be, as opposed to focusing on, but we are talking about racism and discrimination and prejudice and stereotypes. I mean, that is a part of our work. But for me, the goal is how do we get to this place of recognizing and allowing for the diversity that exists. I mean, it is. And so why we continue to fight what is, and have this need to kind of to subjugate different groups of people. Uh, I don't understand it. So for me, and when I think about the kids that I've served, it's always been an issue of equity, right? About them not being able to access the curriculum because they don't show up in the way that the norm has chosen or decided, at least in the U.S., to teach. My kids were predominantly kids of color. I worked in National City, which is South San Diego, so largely Latino, the Latinx population, and there was a disconnect, between the stand and deliver, and I'm going to fill your bucket, as a teacher, and you come to be filled up. Doesn't work anymore. And it hasn't worked for a very long time. And our kids are starting to ask why, like, why do I need to learn this? And they're starting to, there's so much information. They can fact check themselves. And I just think that, if we're not willing to focus on the fact that there are many, people show up in different colors and different languages, different religions, different backgrounds, and that we need to create space for that diversity, and that we need to give people what they need to be successful, and not give everyone the same. So that's the difference between the equity and equality. I don't want to give everyone the same. I want to give you what you need. You can thrive, and then inclusion, where we can all feel like we belong, because ultimately it is about belonging. It's about us feeling that we are able to contribute, and that I have a space, and that I'm respected for what I bring to the table that's uniquely me, that doesn't have to look like you or somebody else, right? And so that for me has always been my goal.
Yeah, while preparing for this interview and looking over your website and different materials and so on, I realized that my teaching has kind of been focused on the negative: discrimination, racism, genocide, and all of these things. And so I think that's really important that your organization is positive, and I look forward to the workshop that you're going to do at my university later on.
I'm sorry that it's not going to be in person, but I am very excited to do this.
um, if you could only recommend one book to help people to become more culturally aware and better prepared for working with a very diverse group, whether this is teachers in school or maybe business students later on who work in business, do you have only one book you could recommend? Because on Twitter it's all over the place. There's like hundreds of books you could read. So which one would you should we get for our listeners who don't have
yeah,
it?
I saw that question beforehand, because it's hard to just get one, but I thought about it, and I think the one that I would recommend for just to start off is by Beverly Tatum, and it's Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?
Ah.
And that is, and it really is about how we have been conditioned to notice color, and we I think one of the things, and I actually pulled it up so that I could see it. I'm just going to read it. It's very short. It says,
Yeah.
"Walk into any racially mixed high school, and you will see Black youth seated together in the cafeteria. Of course, it is not just the Black kids sitting together, the white, Latino, Asian Pacific, In some reasons, American Indian youth are clustered in their own groups too, but our eyes are drawn and we focus on the Black kids, right? And so this idea of how the way we've been trained and the way we've been conditioned to see, Black children as problematic, and therefore we notice them, and therefore we find problems, right? Because we're looking for them as opposed to noticing everybody together. I think it's just a really good book to really focus our perspectives and how we might be unconsciously seeing, creating and seeing things because just the way we've been conditioned to do it.
Yeah, well, I'll have to get that for our library. I'm it's one we both
do. So
yeah, well, thanks for the tip.
Yeah, pleasure.
Yeah, I can't help but ask you, and this is kind of a question because we are talking a lot about why society can't be colorblind. But in Germany, they have this word race, and due to the historical and cultural context of the Nazi period, it's a real dirty word, and some Germans don't want to use it at all. What does race mean to you? And do you advocate the use of this term?
Yeah, that's so race. I think just in general, by definition, we understand that it's a social construct, right?
Yeah.
That it's not, that it doesn't really exist because we're really truly the human race. But we know, and and again, I can speak for the U.S. specifically, that we must keep it in our vocabulary because there are so many experiences that still exist. Me being a Black woman living in this country has consequences, right? And there's things that I worry about that my white counterparts do not necessarily have to worry about. And if you take race off and just say it doesn't exist and you focus on the human race, it doesn't change that I'm having a Black experience. It doesn't change that our Mexican, our immigrant populations are having a brown experience in this country, right? And so just removing the word, what we have to do is come to grips with race as the social construct that it is, and identify the racism and the prejudice and the discrimination that exists. And when we can rectify that, then we don't have to talk about race anymore. But you can't just remove a word and not take away the circumstances, right? Yeah. That construct was created to separate us. That construct was created to make a superior and inferior group of people. And until we can rectify that history and change the reality, we cannot take that word out of our dictionary because it doesn't change anything. It just means that now we don't actually have the word to talk about what's happening.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I have this discussion with German students quite often because they want to see, words have different connotations in different languages.
Yes.
And they really don't want to use that word. They only want to use ethnicity or something of that case. But in English, it has a completely different connotation, and American and British culture and so on have their cultural understandings of that. So thank you for that clarification. Black Lives Matter movement. This is all over social media. There's protesting happening around the U.S. and the world. Has your phone been ringing off the hook? Has it had a really positive impact on your business? Are more people looking?
Yeah, it has, and it's kind of we were talking about that. Funny enough, about our business is kind of thriving at the moment because of this negativity, and that's actually a dissonance for me, right? My goal would be to be out of business and get to go back to the classroom and teach, because we wouldn't need the work that I do. right? But the upside is that we haven't seen this kind of movement since the 60s, 60s, early 70s, and we finally have recaptured the country's consciousness around the racial issues that really never disappeared in this country.
Oh.
And I don't know what it's like in Germany, but I know for sure that people thought, especially with the election of Obama, President Obama, that we were post-racial, and in fact, I believe that the reason we are where we are today is because he was elected president. And don't get me wrong, I'm a supporter, but I think that there was such a fear in this country that I'm going to do a very blanket generalization because I'm not speaking for all white people by any means, but I think there was a fear in this country that when we had a black president, that white culture was going to disappear, right? And that the control and the entitlement of whiteness, separate from people, but whiteness in this country was going to diminish. And I think that reaction to that fear was where we are now.
Yeah, well, if you recall Neil Hurston's essay, How It Feels to Be Colored Me, from the 20s or 30s, but I guess fear has been
the
around.
Harlem Renaissance time, And by the way, any book from that era, Zora Hurston and James Baldwin. I mean, the things that they were talking about during that time period are 100% still pertinent today.
Yeah, that's the kind of sad thing about it. I keep teaching classes on the 1960s, hoping that, this will spark some kind of action or protest. And so far, I don't know what kind of impact it has had, but I'm hoping this time, maybe for a little bit more reaction of that. Yeah. So this brings me to the question of change, is there are things happening that to me are almost mind-boggling because I've been watching this, following the topics for years. Why can't NFL football teams change their name? Or some really offensive names or images on products. I was in Austria, and there's a beer. It's called Mohr Beer, and it's got a black silhouette of a person on there. And you see these things, and some of them are changing, and actually quite a lot. But I'm kind of wondering if this is just going to put a Band-Aid. People are going to say, oh, we've done our part. We changed the names of products. We're not going to use the word master bedroom anymore because of the word and this kind of thing. Do you think that something's really changed this time, that this is going to be lasting? And
well, it's hard to say. I think that we've had many opportunities in the course of my lifetime to do better, and we haven't taken them. I think that right now, because what we've seen again is that with strong social movement, and like kind of civil unrest, that people are willing to change, but they're changing not because I don't believe necessarily they're changing because they think it's the right thing. Maybe some people are, some things, but I think, the power is in the dollar or the euro or whatever, because if you do not, people are about making profits. The reason why race is so big in this country is even though they say they're post-racial, all the marketing has been racial. The majority of the marketing, because they know that race sells, whether it's about dividing or making you prettier or making you more white or what, all these things, race sells. And so when you refuse to support that type of messaging, and you refuse by not spending your dollars there, you begin to see change, right? So my thing is, put your money where your mouth is. If you truly want to to see change, we can make change happen by refusing to spend money unless they do it differently. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing now. It's like, don't spend $1, don't spend €1, don't support. Like for me, my personal piece is I will not go to a movie that does not have a person of color in a significant role that doesn't die in the first 30 minutes, right? And it doesn't have to be a Black person. It just has to be a person of color. Because and it's not to say that I don't like, the Hugh Grants of the world or, the different actors. And I'll watch those movies when they come to Netflix. But I am not going to a movie theater to support something where I can't see myself or other people of color in it. Now, that's my personal thing. So, does that make a difference? Maybe not. But what if a large part of the population said, okay, I'm not going to go see these movies anymore unless you have representation. I went to, and just a short tangent, I went to a film festival and I'm watching this film and I wish I remembered the name because I'd love to give it a plug, but I was watching it and for the first 30 minutes, I'm like, what's weird about this movie? And I realized it actually had like people, like it looked like my life. It was people of all different races together, and it looked like what New York really looked like, right? And so they did a Q&A with the producer and the director, and I said, how did you get like all these people of color? She's like, I had to fight. So imagine this, like, she's like, I was not going to make this movie without representation. I wanted New York to look like New York. She goes, but they drew the line and they refused to produce her movie if she wanted the protagonist to have to be a woman of color and have a love interest that was an interracial love interest, and they wouldn't allow it. So the love interest, the main characters were still white, although you had all these friends and people around them, but she wanted them to be interracial, and they drew the line. They were like, we will not produce this film if it's an interracial couple, but you can have your diversity in the background, right? And so you imagine, like, it's a system perpetuating itself, right? If I know that I want, like, my husband's white. If I want to produce a movie about us and it's not an autobiography, but I want to do a story, I can't even get someone to fund me because they don't want to promote that message, right? That's how ingrained the discrimination is, at least in our country.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't have that example last semester because I taught the film Loving, right?
Oh, yeah, right.
A racial couple in
Yeah.
1997 who won their Supreme Court
That's
case.
Right. That's right.
And, it's so common in interracial couples, you find that kind of hard to believe that filmmakers are still very much concerned about making a film about that topic. Yeah. So, there's still...
Unless it's historical.
Behind the scenes that I guess, we don't think of or know. So thank you for sharing that story with us. Yeah. We don't have too much to go, but I want to talk about your RIR protocol, recognize, interrupt, and repair a bit. Everybody is so full of rage and angry about something. And it's not that they don't have the right to be angry, because that's a normal human reaction. But, your training is so positive and, trying to have compassionate conversations with people. How do you help people to remain calm and, not get carried away in the moment when they hear some kind of racist statement or really improper statement or see some behavior that's really disconcerting?
Well, that's the R, right? The first R is recognize. And I think that's how we get past it. And I'm not saying that I'm even a pro at it, because sometimes you're just triggered, right? But the idea of recognizing first, and the recognize is really about getting in touch with your own personal feelings. It's an internal process. It's not external. So if I recognize that whatever happened before me has triggered rage or anger, then the invitation before I even open my mouth is to actually ride my own wave, emotional wave, right? Because if I don't, then nothing, if the rage is what's triggered, then the only thing that can come out of my mouth is more rage. Right. But if I can ride that emotional wave and really think about, okay, what is it about that triggered me? What is it that caused me the rage? And then I think that the goal is really what has to shift, because usually when you trigger rage or anger, then your goal is to make that other person wrong. Your goal is to shame that other person. I mean, that's when it's like you did this wrong, you did this. But what if our goal was about deeper understanding? What if our goal was, for me, when you say something, to really understand where that came from, and why you said that, and what does that mean to you, right? And what if my goal was really about healing as opposed to making you wrong? Then I come at it different. It doesn't change my rage or my anger, right? Again, it's a natural human response to situations. But what it does change is how I go about engaging. And so if I can ride that emotional wave, then and get to a real true desire to deepen our relationship and to have a deeper understanding, then I can ask different questions. So instead of reacting and yelling back at you, I can actually stop and ask questions of you that require you to then to speak to it, to either provide more clarity or to, I think sometimes people say things and they haven't even really thought about them. So if I actually get to ask you and say, what does that mean to you? Like when you say that, it feels this way, but is that what you mean? Then it puts the responsibility on the person who's said or done something to actually really think about their own actions and reflect. And I'm not saying that it doesn't necessarily, I don't want people to believe like the protocol is not some magic wand that just changes everything and we all communicate passionately. But what it does do is I think it really gives us an opportunity to know someone, and maybe the repair is still that we just agree to disagree or we don't engage, but it just feels different, right? And again, everyone's entitled to their beliefs, everyone's entitled to their feelings, but we have to share the space together. And so if we have to share the space together, how do we do it? How do we share it in a way where we can be at least respectful to each other, or at least, do it in a way where I'm not imposing my beliefs on you and vice versa, where we're not being forced to, like it's either my way or the highway kind of thing.
How long do you think people have to practice this? I mean, you're going to do workshops for us, but how long do you think people have to practice this before they feel comfortable doing it? And I know individuals are different and so on, but I mean,
it is a practice. It's a journey. There's not a destination. I've been doing this for over 15 years, and I am far more comfortable than I was when I started. But I still have moments, depending on the situation, where I'm because I'm triggered, right? And
yeah.
so I don't, I think it is a practice. I think that's just it. It's not. There's going to be times that. It's going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be times where you're like, oh, that was much easier. And I think that when people start to see different outcomes and they start to understand that you can be in conflict and it not be ugly, and that it can actually turn into something quite productive, then I think that it builds confidence to continue along it. But for me, it's also about not segregating or compartmentalizing it, right? It's not just a protocol that I use at work. It's a protocol I use in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I use it it's for me personally. It's, I use a protocol in my relationships with my friends and my family, and I use it in my professional life. But it has served me greatly. Because I always make the disclaimer, I'm a Sagittarian and I'm a fire horse, and I tend to sometimes I can spew out things, even though they're true for me, but I shoot that arrow pretty sharp. And so it's really helped me soften my edges around how I communicate so people can hear me.
Yeah, it's really great. And, I don't want to keep you forever, but I'd like to end on a positive note. And do you have a personal story, maybe how your protocol has impacted the life of someone you know, or maybe one of your other trainers at your company? I don't know.
It's funny. Let's see, a personal story. I can just talk even within my organization. I think people have a lot of trauma when it comes to working in education. And I think a lot of people of color have trauma around that being in education in this country. And my company right now is almost predominantly Black women, just quite by accident, not intentional. But it's also interesting who's drawn to the work, right? And I think our practice of the them actually believing that we live what we teach and feeling like they can challenge me and question and be in conversation around things that I make, decisions I make as a company, I think has been super powerful for them to know that we live this protocol. And so it's turned into this a work environment. And one of my employees said, she's like, I've never worked in a place where I can actually 100% speak my truth and know that it's going to be heard and it won't be used. There will be no professional retaliation,
Wow.
for and we do that and we have hard conversations and we truly practice because I'm not going to allow us to do something and teach something that we're not going to live. And so we don't let things fester and we have to deal with it. And then it's not a super great example, but it's just one that's very, because of, currently, like literally in this moment, I'm having that now. I have an employee who has been offered another job, and the fact that she came to me without fear of me retaliating, and actually I'm in support, but I wanted to make sure she also understood her value in this organization, but also that we're always going to support her in being following her dreams. She's a PhD, and she finally got an offer from a university to teach, and so
Yeah.
this idea that she could come and talk to me about it and know that she's going to be supported, and I'm going to, I don't want you to go, but also, um, you know, I want, whereas other places, and you don't tell your boss you got another job because you don't want to be let go, or you don't want to, you
Mm.
fear that retaliation. She felt very comfortable in talking to me about um, this as she makes her decision, so that we can be a part of the decision making together, as opposed to something that's happening in the background, and then all of a sudden I'm getting a letter with 2 weeks notice right at the beginning of school,
Mm.
right? So I think that for me, that's a very powerful example of how the protocol works when you use it.
Yeah, well, that would be great if all work environments were like that, but
Yeah.
trust me, they're not. I've heard stories.
No, I've been in them too, so yeah.
Anyway, so thank you very much for being with us and telling us about your life, your organization, your work. And we look forward to meeting you again in a
Oh, my
workshop.
pleasure.
Hopefully, this will develop into a longer relationship. So, thank you very much.
Oh,
And
my pleasure. Thank you. I enjoyed being here.